joining us for an all-out breakdown of Game 1 of the NBA Finals are from the No Dunks podcast on the Athletic Network, Leigh Ellis. And he's my favorite starter, by the way. I just had to say that. And Sportswriter Josh Planos. Welcome to Sports Desk. Leigh, it's been a long time, my friend, and thank you for finally joining us here on Sports Desk. How are you doing?
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a lot of fun when I talk with our Filipino friends. We have a lot of fans out there of our show, so it's an honor to join you here, Andre. I really always have a lot of fun talking with you guys, so thank you for having me.
And we miss you. We miss the starters, but you're doing a fantastic job right now. Thank you so much, Leigh. And Josh, looking sharp as always, my man. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks as always, Andre. Nice to see you.
All right, Josh, I'll start with Leigh since we didn't have him before we started the series. Leigh, tell us what you thought about that Game 1, 118-105. What did you see, and how did Phoenix beat Milwaukee to start this finals going?
Well, it pretty much went to plan, I think, for the Phoenix Suns. They came into the series, I think, with a lot of advantages. They had the rest advantage, they had the health advantage, they had home court advantage, and all those factors played a part in the victory there for Phoenix. They got off to a good start, and then in that third quarter, Chris Paul really took over and put his stamp on the game. And I think that's where the game was ultimately decided in that third quarter when Chris Paul got inside, scored a lot of points, and really just put his team in a strong position to close it out. Now, Milwaukee didn't give up, as you mentioned off the top of the show. They fought. They got it to single digits late into that fourth quarter, but ultimately Phoenix had far too much firepower through Chris Paul, through Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton also gave them a really big game at both ends of the floor, grabbing rebounds, contesting shots, and also finishing it off. And then they also got good production from their bench. Cam Payne and Cam Johnson, the two Cams, went out there and also contributed 10 points each. So I think overall, Phoenix got a lot more contributions from sort of everybody who went out there and got some minutes for the Suns, whereas the Milwaukee Bucks, they got a huge boost. Just the fact that Giannis played, we know coming into this series and into the game last night, he was questionable. Obviously, he went through his pre-game routine and did enough to convince the doctors and the coaching staff that he was good to go. And I thought ultimately he actually looked pretty good. He moved very well. At times he had, some solid moves inside into the paint there. He bodied DeAndre Ayton out of the way, and he also had that incredible chase down block. And that, to me, showed that he was feeling pretty much as close to 100% as possible. He was a little bit rusty, but I think that's mainly because he missed those last couple of games in the Atlanta series. But look, it's one game. When you are the home team and it's the first game of any series, you are expected to win. You should win. So Phoenix got that done. But if you're the Bucks, I think they took a lot out of this game and enough out of this game to believe that perhaps game 2 and going forward in this series, there's still a good chance. They didn't get many free throws. Chris Middleton didn't get to the line at all. And I think that's a point of contention there from the Bucks. And certainly Coach Budenholzer addressed that today, that he felt that, Chris Middleton deserved a few calls and he didn't get any. So in any series, that first game you want to win. The Phoenix Suns having home court, as I mentioned earlier, and having game 1 at home, I think for them, they got the job done as you would expect. But I certainly don't think this series is over by any means. I think you're going to see a strong bounce back game here from the Bucks in game 2. And hopefully this does set up for what could be a really fascinating and an enthralling series.
Thank you, Leigh, for that. I think we can just end the show right now after hearing that. But I want to hear from the guy who said Bucks in 4, if I'm not mistaken. Josh, you went with the Suns or the Bucks? I can't really remember right now. I want to get your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, I went with Phoenix.
Phoenix,
sticking with Phoenix. They did exactly what they were supposed to do in Game 1. Since 2005, only once did the home team in the finals lose Game 1. So this was expected, but nonetheless impressive. We got the Chris Paul show. We got the DeAndre Ayton show. Devin Booker, welcome to the NBA Finals. Phoenix was, clicking on all cylinders, and it was, a true joy to watch. And hopefully we get, a close series the rest of the way. Because, Game 1 was pretty fun in its own right.
Let's talk about DeAndre Ayton. Leigh was talking about him and how huge an impact. But DeAndre Ayton, we all know about Chris Paul and Devin Booker. Of course, they're the go-to guys and just can nail down the stretch. But how about Ayton, his expiring contract? Chris Paul was heard saying in a press conference that man deserves his bag. He'll get paid in the summer. And he's just showing out here. Let's take a look at his numbers. 22 points, 80% from the field, 19 boards, as I keep on saying, in 39 minutes of play. Let's not forget, because in that year, in that 2018 draft, people always remember Luka Doncic, Trae Young, but this guy went number 1 in that draft. Let's talk about DeAndre Ayton and how crucial he is, especially in this series. Leigh?
Well, DeAndre Ayton is huge. He's been fantastic the entire playoffs here for the Phoenix Suns. He's really grown a lot throughout this season and grown even more so come playoff time. Against the Denver Nuggets, he was fantastic. Against the Clippers, he was also not against the Clippers, excuse me. The Denver Nuggets were the team they played last in the Lakers in that first round. He was also very, very good. And that is what the Suns were hoping for when they drafted him. We know there's been a lot of talk about, Luka Doncic and Trae Young and Bagley and all those guys as well. But ultimately, DeAndre Ayton is in the position where he's in the finals first, and he's having a significant impact on this team. And I think that's what's really pleasing for the Phoenix Suns front office and the fans out there is, for a lot of years, they've heard that, that Doncic is the best player in that draft and Trae Young is better than DeAndre Ayton as well. That's what they've heard. But now in this situation, DeAndre Ayton is really stepping up. And I think what you're seeing is, playing alongside Chris Paul has really helped not just Ayton, but Devin Booker as well, the younger players, because, those guys have had the talent for a couple of years. We've seen it. We saw some of it down there in the bubble in Orlando last year, certainly with Devin Booker, but they hadn't really had any serious regular season success until this year when they come along, and finish second in the Western Conference. And Chris Paul, just that veteran leadership that he has, that ability to teach the younger players, his team, his teammates how to play better. And now you're seeing it all play out perfectly here for Phoenix in the finals so far. So, DeAndre Ayton, he contributes at both ends of the floor. Early on in his career, he had some trouble sort of staying on the court. His defensive presence and awareness wasn't all that good. But he's learned in these last couple of seasons, especially this season, just how to be more effective, contesting shots without fouling, rebounding the ball, securing those rebounds to really close out the defensive possession. And that's helping Phoenix. That their defense has been one of their most impressive facets this whole season, and it's really showing here in the playoffs. And then on the offensive end, he's showing some variety to his game as well. In the pick and roll game there, he can run that with Chris Paul. He's also got that little mid-range floater. People are making a comparison. I mean, it's a little too early yet to the sort of David Robinson sort of play style, but I don't think he's quite at that level yet. But certainly someone, who's been in the league for a few years. He's had a lot of losses. He's had a lot of time to sort of learn and grow. And now it's starting to translate to success on the court for the Suns. So I think DeAndre Ayton, he's very, very important to the success of the Suns, especially now as we know that the backup center Dario Saric tore his ACL last night. So sadly for Saric, he will not take any further part in the series. And if they don't play him, it's Frank Kaminsky, who played a handful of minutes last night and didn't do all that well. So the Suns now rely even more so on what DeAndre Ayton can give them. But what we've seen so far in the playoffs, I think they can feel confident that he'll be able to deliver.
Well, Leigh has touched up on it already, Josh, but how concerning is this for the Suns, with aside from Ayton, of course, he mentioned already Saric going down with that injury, and they went to Torrey Craig at times, and also Frank Kaminsky, who didn't really quite fill in well. But are you concerned, Josh? My apologies, you did say Phoenix. I believe it was a sweep. Are you concerned with this development with Saric going down for the Suns?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's a clear downgrade losing Saric. I mean, he is so versatile, and, DeAndre Ayton's a human being. He needs to rest at some point. So, folks need to fill in, where needed. And unfortunately for Phoenix, that means Frank Kaminsky. And as you saw in game one, he got absolutely filleted on seemingly every pick and roll, every single defensive possession he was out there. So, Torrey Craig can fill in as needed if Phoenix wants to go super small. But I mean, it's a real problem that they need to address. And what's interesting in terms of strategy is, there's kind of this school of thought that, Milwaukee might need to play down, to be able to space the floor, get out and transition and really play at a faster pace of play. But, at this point, you should, in my book, probably double down on how, big you are on the interior with Brook Lopez and really kind of get to work on the glass. So, I mean, it's a huge issue for Phoenix. We'll see kind of what those adjustments are in game two and moving forward. But never a right time to lose a key player, but certainly the worst is in the NBA Finals.
Well, Leigh, Josh, please stay where you guys are. We still have a lot to talk about this NBA Finals. We're back to Sports Desk only here on CNN Philippines. Talking about the NBA after Game 1 of the Finals yesterday. Phoenix prevailing at home, and we still have with us on the show Leigh Ellis and Josh Planos. And it's about the NBA. It's always fun talking about the NBA Finals. Now let's go to Giannis Antetokounmpo. He was listed as questionable for Game 1. A lot of fans counting out the Bucks because of the status of his knee injury. Let's take a look at his numbers, though. He had 20 points, 17 rebounds, also dishing out 4 assists in 35 minutes here. He did shoot 6 of 11 from the floor, 54, close to 55%. How did he look to you in Game 1? Josh, Leigh, did it seem like he's bothered with this knee injury, or is he human at all? What can you say about Giannis? I'll start with you, Josh.
You know, if he was bothered by his knee, we certainly didn't pick up on it. We saw him in the warm-ups, kind of going through with the sleeve on it. You think, I mean, the last time we saw this guy on a court, he hyperextended his knee. It looked terrible. It looked like, not only would the finals be out of question, but maybe next season could be in jeopardy. And sure enough, he showed up like a bionic man last night and was everywhere on the floor on both ends. He's a 2-time MVP for a reason, but props to him and that Milwaukee strength and conditioning team for getting him out on the court, because I thought that was a remarkable performance given the circumstances.
How about you, Leigh? Obviously, Giannis isn't 100% healthy, but he still delivered and gave us numbers.
Yeah, he did. And I think if you compare his game to when James Harden came back from his hamstring injury, or even when Trae Young came back from his ankle injury, you could clearly tell looking at those guys that they probably shouldn't have been playing. And if it wasn't for the playoffs, they probably wouldn't have been playing. And Giannis, I think last night, if it wasn't Game 1 of the NBA Finals, he too probably wouldn't have played. They'd probably sit him out for at least another few days, perhaps even a week or longer. And in fact, the finals were originally scheduled to start tomorrow night, Thursday night, East Coast US time. But because the other series ended, the Bucks and the Hawks series ended early, the NBA decided to move it ahead a couple of games. So that sort of pushed the timetable up if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, and I guess they just worked continually on getting Giannis to the point where he was good enough to go. And look, to be honest, I was a little bit concerned because you only have to go back 2 years ago when Kevin Durant came back against the Toronto Raptors, and he was coming off an Achilles injury, and he looked okay out there, but then he obviously suffered a serious injury there where he blew out his Achilles and was missing for the entire next season. And that was the thing I was really worried about, that if Giannis came back and he wasn't 100% healthy, especially after we saw that knee injury, that perhaps he would risk doing further damage, not just for this playoff series, but for his entire career. Now, that wasn't the case. I thought, again, you could tell by just the way he was performing, and he was running and he was moving and he was able to, sort of erupt off that leg, that he looked as close to healthy as possible. But the fact that he missed the last couple of games of the series against Atlanta, I think he was just a little bit gassed, a little bit winded in terms of getting into game shape. So, the good thing is, though, that the Bucks, they played a good game last night. They've got lots to clear up and to correct going into Game 2. But the fact that Giannis got through the game, played a good amount of minutes, 35 minutes, not quite what they would have liked. I think they probably would have wanted him to play into the 40s if he was 100% ready to go and able to go. But now that he's gotten through that game, and by all reports today, he's pulled up fine. He hasn't had any soreness from that knee injury. So tomorrow night for Game 2, I think you're going to see something a little closer to what we expect from Giannis, sort of regular season Giannis, where he's really impactful at both ends of the floor, because, he's a 2-time MVP. We know that. He's a defensive player of the year as well already. So he just has so much importance to everything that the Bucks do at both ends of the floor. And now that he's got a game under his belt, I hope we see an even better performance from him in Game 2.
And when I saw the chase down block on Bridges, I was like, is there a knee injury with Giannis? Okay, before we continue this conversation about the NBA Finals, first, let's find out the answer to our quiz question of the day. Again, the question I asked was, CP3 played a total of 123 career playoff games before making it to the NBA Finals, the third most in NBA history. Now, who are first and second on this list? You guys want to answer? Leigh, you know the answer to this? Josh?
I'm guessing Carmelo Anthony is one of them.
Okay. And then the other one? You have another guess?
No, I can't think of who else
Okay,
that would be.
I'll ask Josh. Josh, who do you think?
Andre, I've got nothing for the second show in a row. Sorry, man.
Who we need Ennis. Somebody call Ennis Cantor right now. Well, the correct answer, sorry, Leigh, but it's Paul Millsap, who played 129 playoff games, and Al Horford, who played 124 games. Okay, now we got that aside. Yes. Now you know.
I saw both of those guys up close when they were playing for the Atlanta Hawks, and I should have remembered that because they often made the playoffs, but they just didn't have ultimately a lot of success there. But two very good veteran players, a lot of All-Star game representations between those two.
Well, now the battle between the stars of the backcourt in Game 1. We're talking about the front court, DeAndre Ayton, but Game 1 basically was a lopsided affair, at least in terms of on the offensive end. Let's take a look at the D-Book and CP3's numbers here. Chris Paul and Devin Booker combining for 59 points and 15 assists for the Suns, and that's even with Booker shooting just 1 of 8 from beyond the arc. Now you've got Middleton and Holiday for the Bucks with a combined 39 points, with Middleton just accounting for 29 of those, Holiday with just 10 points, but they also grabbed 14 rebounds and dished out 13 dimes. Now, should the Bucks be concerned about this? Is this a trend that we can expect this whole series with D-Book and CP3 prevailing? And do you see the Bucks, still winning with these kinds of numbers from Middleton and Holiday? Josh?
Yeah, it'll be a really quick series if Phoenix continues to play this well in the backcourt.
Sure.
Andre, I'm sure you can appreciate this. You and the CNN team are working on a mastery of broadcasting. Last night we saw Chris Paul mastering the point guard position. I hope we don't lose sight of that because he really has reached full form. He's just everywhere he needs to be. I mean, he's curling off screens and canning 15-footers. He's running the entire show on offense, seemingly at will. It's remarkable to see, and it's been one of the more notable, playoff performances, frankly, that I've ever seen in my entire life. So, what he's doing is remarkable, and Phoenix is certainly in the driver's seat if him and Booker continue to slay the opposition the way they did in Game 1. And honestly, on the flip side, Drew Holiday really needs to step up offensively. He had some crater like mistakes, especially in terms of his decision making. There was a play on a fast break where he just lost the ball out of bounds. Of course, his shooting is down, as we touched on the other night. But yeah, it's going to be a really long series if Milwaukee can't even come reasonably close to playing it even with those two.
8 turnovers combined from Middleton and Holiday, 5 for Chris Middleton and 3 from Holiday. And Drew just shooting 4 of 14 from the floor, 28%, 0 of 4 from beyond the outside. Leigh, with this kind of showing from Holiday, I'm sure it will improve in the coming games, hopefully for the Bucks fans. But how do the Bucks even stop or slow down Devin Booker and Chris Paul here?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of problems defensively there for the Bucks that they have to clean up because, as we saw and as we discussed earlier, certainly in that third quarter, Chris Paul chose his opponent, really, basically his defensive matchup. He called for the sort of switches and got Bobby Portis or Brook Lopez or whoever it was.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And the thing is, a lot of people saying that the Bucks have to improve that, obviously going into Game 2. But the problem is, even if you leave Chris Middleton on Chris Paul, that's not really much of a deterrent for Chris Paul. He can get into that mid-range. He can get in for those layups and those floaters. I think the best defensive matchup for him is Drew Holiday. Outside of that is Giannis Antetokounmpo, which he might get him for a play or two, but he's not going to spend the whole night on Chris Paul because, again, as great as Giannis is, Chris Paul has that ability to still just get to his spot, that little mid-range. He likes to sort of zigzag across the paint there, across the free throw line to get to that sort of falling away mid-ranger that he's been so effective doing. So I think, Mike Budenholzer, if I'm Budenholzer, I'd probably look to trap Chris Paul as long as the trap is not coming from Devin Booker's man. Maybe it's a Jay Crowder, whoever's defending Jay Crowder at the time is like, okay, you come off and help because we want the ball out of Chris Paul's hand. If Jay Crowder had 6 threes in a game and we know he's capable of nights like that, he's a very streaky shooter. I think for Budenholzer, you'd rather live with that than just the way that Chris Paul dissected Milwaukee in that third quarter to really seize control of the game. So that's probably some focus here for Budenholzer going into Game 2. I will say, though, if you are a Milwaukee Bucks fan, losing Game game one is certainly not uncommon territory. They lost the first game against the Atlanta Hawks in Milwaukee. Right. They lost the first game against the Brooklyn Nets. That was in Brooklyn. In fact, they lost the first two in Brooklyn. And even if you go back to the very first series against the Miami Heat, while they swept the Heat, game one went to overtime, and basically Jimmy Butler almost won that game there for the Heat. So, in this playoff series alone, and if you go back to the bubble as well, I mean, it was a different season, but the Bucks just simply don't perform well in games one of a series. It's just something, a trend that they've got. It's not a good one, as because they've had some home games in there, but it's sort of, if you're a Bucks fan, that one game doesn't decide the series. They can, and they tend to bounce back. And now the real question will be exactly how Mike Budenholzer makes those transitions and adjustments going in here to game two, because again, you can still lose the first two games of a series on a road and the series isn't over, but it's a much more comfortable situation, a much more better situation if they head back to Milwaukee, at least with the split, which now means they have to win game two if that's the case.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. It will be an interesting game come game two, still in Phoenix, Thursday in the U.S. and Friday here in the Philippines. Thank you again, and we'll see you again next time for sure. Thank you, Leigh, and thank you, Josh. That was writer Josh Planos and Leigh Ellis of the No Dunks podcast on the Athletic Network.